Hello chaps and chapettes, how's it going? Screezilla here and I hope you're all well today. And you join me in the Panther F. The Panther 5, basically, the Panther. Now, the Panther F is a interesting vehicle because, well, it wasn't actually finished. You could say that this is much like the Panther 2, in the fact it wasn't properly built. Yeah. I do wonder, if they do remove the Panther 2, if the Panther F will get removed as well, because, well, it only makes sense, really, because, again, this tank wasn't built, the hull was, but the turret wasn't. And the turret is the main thing that you have on the Panther F that's different. So, what is the main difference with the Panther F over the G, H, A, D, all the other variants, basically? Well, and just here, this lovely guy, Kevin there, thank you, mate, for getting in this cap circle and meaning that others can't cap it. Good job on you, Kevin501. Yeah. Well, ho there, thanks for waiting. But, yeah, this guy really screwed us up. He screwed the pooch for a lot of team members. Anyway, enough about that. The Panther F was a production version of basically the Panther 2. It used a lot of the similar parts that were going to be on the Panther 2. After it was scrapped, they went with the Panther F. Now, the big thing for the Panther F was its turret. Rheinmetall designed an armoured gun mantlet with a narrow front plate with 120mm of thickness. The narrow turret presented a smaller target and spared weight as well. The design was refined in about March 1944 under the name of the Schnellblende Turm Panther. This was one of several designs later collectively called the Schermelturm. Sorry, I'm pretty piss poor at reading things like that. I tend to sound Norwegian. Anyway, this was adapted with basically to use the KWK-42. Oh, hello there, Super Hellcat. Did you just not notice me? Well, that's okay. We're going to turn around slowly, get the gun onto target, and we're going to blow you up. Goodbye. Thanks for playing. The Tiger 2 did get a bit of a pummeling, but it seems it's okay. I'm just going to back up here and see, because I did spot a medium tank earlier. Nope, nothing there. We're safe. Anyway. This turret was much better protected. It was smaller, and the best thing about it, it was not heavier than the original. It was equipped with the same gun mantlet as the Tiger 2, basically. It also had an inbuilt stereoscopic rangefinder, and a new commander's cupola. There were new steel-rimmed wheels on the tank, which gave it a better longevity, basically, and also reduced some of the weight. Daimler-Benz were mainly the ones producing this, and there are reports that maybe a few Panther Fs did make it out of the factory. They were using the Panther G turret, so none of them actually made it out with the turret in its design. Now, one of the other things that I find interesting is, well, I find interesting, it's pretty boring in fact, is the fact that we've got the MG34 machine gun on this tank, when actually Screezilla, it should have the MG42. The main thing for the Panther F, main sort of bits that needed to be done, was to have the MG42 installed instead of the MG34. Now, the big design prospects for this tank was to eliminate possible shot traps under the mantlet, and that was done by removing that big old gun mantlet that you see on the standard Panther. Let's just switch here to the front view. As you see, it's more like a Tiger 2 with that gun mantlet there, so that does help eliminate shot traps coming in. To increase the protection without increasing the weight of the turret, which was done with the Schmel turret, small term, to reduce the turret frontal plate size as much as possible while keeping enough room for the crew to work in, which was done. The stereoscopic rangefinder, which is that this one here. So it's got two different lenses to it, and it allows for a more accurate range finding and basically view for the gunner and commander. To make the turret easier to convert for commander tank versions, the Panzer Schwering, and also for infrared devices to be installed as well. So again, this tank had provisions for infrared. They were actually going to try and add infrared to it. So infrared optics, which would have been very interesting. They needed to keep the same Panther turret ring, so all the turrets would work on it. The big thing for the Panther F was to make it easier to produce and cheaper as well. And this is something about the Panther that was very, very good. Hello there, IS-2. Goodbye, IS-2. The main thing for the Panther F was actually, it wasn't to make a better tank. The Panther F wasn't going to be a Super Panther, which many people think it was going to be. It was to make it cheaper and quicker to produce. That's the whole point of the Panther F, is they wanted a cheaper, easily produced tank. In fact, the prototypes for the Panther, you had the what was it called? The VK30/50, I think it was, which was the the Daimler-Benz version of the Panther, and that would have been much cheaper and also easier to produce. Estimates show that the Panther with the 30/50 variant, they could have probably produced around about 7,000 to 8,000 of these tanks instead of the 4,000 that was produced, and that would have been a big amount of tanks. It would have been similar to the Sherman production levels, and it would have been a much better tank than the Sherman too. Now we've got some artillery coming in, so we're going to hide underneath the house here. Now, there were some things that the Germans wanted to do for the Panther F as well. One of the main things was actually having an automatic loader for the KWK-42 L70, and this was planned to be introduced in April of 1945, I think. Yeah, 45, it would have been 45, what am I talking about? Another thing that they were working on was stabilised gun sights. The infrared scope, as I've said before. They were tossing around the idea of actually using a T-44 there that's been blown up, thank you very much. They were tossing around the idea of using the SLA-16 diesel engine in it as well, but that never got introduced. With those features, it would have made this tank a very, very menacing presence. Now, the Panther F was not, as I say, it wasn't a huge upgrade over the standard Panthers, and one of the issues that still caused havoc with this tank was its turret rotation rate, which was very slow. When you compare it to that of a Sherman, for instance, the Sherman is 30 degrees a second, whereas the Panther is only 10, I think, off the top of my head, which really, really slowed it down quite a lot. I'll actually get my proper figures in a second. Hello there. Goodbye there. Scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Scrolled past what I was looking for. Dooby-dooby-dooby-doo-doo. So yeah, it really did make a it really did affect the tank. Can't find what I'm looking for. Oh well. Yeah, it's around that time period, that speed. Anyway, and one of the other big issues for the Panther turret was its hydraulics. So the turret itself was run off the hydraulics from the engine, which meant if the engine got disabled or broke down or wasn't working, it meant there was not enough power to move the turret, which was problematic, as you can imagine. Whereas the electronic turret in the Sherman, which moved much faster and smoother, was able to work when the tank's engine was off as well, which was a big benefit. Anyway, one other thing I want to talk about is actually the side skirts on the Panther. Now, the what's the actual name for it? There's stop the small term. What is the name? Trying to find it. Can't find it. While I'm looking for that, the Panther F actually does exist, and there is a Panther F. No, sorry, there is a Panther. Sorry, the Panther 2 hull does exist, and there is one in Fort Knox, which is interesting. But again, it's only the hull, and that's the same with the Panther F. There is only a hull to these vehicles. There's no turret, which is the important part. Where am I? I've lost my notes now, which is fun. Oh gosh, everything goes wrong. Anyway, the side skirts. I can't remember the actual proper name for them, and I can't find what I'm looking for, so I'm just going to talk. Basically, these side skirts. Oh, there's a house there. These here, the same as the skirts, the side spaced armor on the Panther, sorry, the Panzer IV and things like that. They weren't actually there to stop heat. That's a common misconception, which is pretty interesting because a lot of people do think that it's there to protect against heat. It's not. The reason it's there is to stop anti-tank rifles. Now, one of the problem with all the medium tanks is they have very light armour. Now, the Panther was very much like that. The Germans tended to have very low side armour. And they still do, actually, with the Leo and stuff like that. But you've got 60mm of armour, and it's not too bad up here where it's sloped. As you can see, there's a small slope on them. And same with the... Thank you there, Tiger. Same with the Tiger. You can see that sloping on the side there. But one of the problems was this section here where the wheels are, where the tracks go, because that was flat plate armour. And what would happen is an anti-tank rifle would penetrate that without too much hassle. Now, an anti-tank rifle is not going to cause much damage once it penetrates, but it will injure your crew. And, of course, a shell going into your tank is never a good idea. So, what the Germans did is they put this plate here, and what it would do is it would interrupt the shot and mean that it either fragmented or would just go slightly awry, and mean it would go off centre, so it wouldn't penetrate as well. Now, another unique thing about the Panther F was it did have a smaller recoil section for the mantlet too, which did allow for the gun to be placed in that turret. Alright, so let's head back to the hangar and let's have a little look at it in the hangar. I wish I could find that note because I'm bothering me now. So, 3 kills in that game, pretty good game. So if we look at the armour, you can see that we've got 50mm of sloped armour, and that gives you a decent amount of protection, you know, about 50-60mm of protection. But this section here was a huge risk area, and this is where the anti-tank rifles would generally penetrate. Now, anti-tank rifles are just that. They're big old rifles that infantry carry. Same as like things like the Piat gun, but the Piat gun, of course, was a close range weapon. These could be shot from, you know, 500 meters, and they would penetrate 40mm of armor. Now, as I say, they're only a small shell. Generally, they would be, I think the biggest ones were similar to that of a 20mm shell. You know, a decent size, you know, 50 cal 20mm shell sort of sizing, which is a decent sized shell. You don't want one of them flying at you. But as I said, these plates were here to stop those anti-tank rifle shells, not to stop heat, and not just for protection of the tracks either. So, the Panther F in the game has the same chassis armour as its other cousins. So if we look at the Panther A, for instance, the main difference with the A, of course, is you have Zimmerite on it, which was removed for the Panther F because many of the components needed for Zimmerite were no longer available. Now, you can find a Zimmerite video on my channel if you want to know what that is. I will try and link it in the end of the video, so if you want to watch that, please feel free to. So what we have on the F is the same sort of chassis as the rest of them. Another interesting thing about the Panther, actually, but just before I finish, is this slope section at the back. Now, the reason they had this slope was so they could fit the fuel tanks and radiators in a little bit easier. If you look at it, sorry, let's zoom out a little bit, that slope means you get more room at the top. It also means you get less overhang at the bottom, so you're not going to have to worry about the tank grounding and stuff like that. If we look at the Tiger, now the Tiger has got a slight slope, but it's pretty much straight. You can see that all of those items take up room here, and it means the engine bay is a little bit bigger. Whereas the Panther has more room in it, which means there's more space for the crew because the rest of it's overhanging here. So it means the crew have a bit more space in the tank. It's not much, but it's enough to make a bit of difference, so the crew are not as compacted. Anyway, I'm losing track now. So, where was I? Armour... gun, yeah, the Panther F. The main difference for this is the turret, as I say. Now, if you look at the turret of this and the Panther 2, pretty much the same turret. The only difference is the Panther 2 gets the 88mm, which was one of those things that nobody's really sure of. You also get the infrared optics on this tank as well. You get the big old infrared projector and things like that, which I really wish they would make useful in game and actually have it so it can be used. But back to the Panther F. So you also have the stereoscopic scope for the commander. So as I say, that is your range finder, and your sort of gun sight as well, which means that you just get better view and better visuals for it. Now, in the modifications, you do actually get a rangefinder modification for this tank, which you don't get for any of the others, I think. Nope, you don't. So, you do get that rangefinder for this tank, which is kind of neat. It does give you that little bit of sort of advantage over other tanks. Unfortunately, you don't get any armour upgrades or anything like that with this vehicle. And also, you don't get a working machine gun at the front still, which is really weird. As I say, the main thing for this tank is it does eliminate shot traps quite well. The gun handling is a little bit better on the tank. The turret is much better. It's a smaller target. If we look front on for this and the Panther A is a relatively big target, as well as having that huge cupola on top. Whereas the F has a much sleeker turret, and also the turret sides, if we look at the A, the sides are sloped vertically, whereas the F is sloped inwards. I can't remember the name of that one. So as you see here, you've got a bit more sloping coming this way rather than up, which means you will bounce shots quite a lot on the side of the turrets, because it is a smaller target, so you do get those nice bounces coming through there. You've also got 120mm of thickness on the front of the turret, which does give you that little bit of more survivability too. Overall, the Panther F was a huge upgrade, and if it had come into service, it would have been a pretty decent tank, in all honesty. If it had all the upgrades that were planned for it, it would have been an absolute monster. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Let me know below what you think of the Panther F. I might do another video on Panthers soon. I do want to kind of do a complete history of video, because the Panther is a very interesting tank. There are a lot of variants, of course. In game we have the Panther A, the G, the F, D, 2. We've also got the Ertz M10, and then of course we've got the Jagdpanther and things like that. So there are many variants of the Panther. Oh, and I almost forgot the Coelian, which again is another Panther variant. So yeah, if you would like to see a bit more of a history of video on the Panther, let me know, because I might do one eventually. I'm also planning on doing the Type 2 at some stage as well. But they're pretty much mammoth undertakings. It's like doing a T-34. It's just there are so many variants and options on them. You know, you can't do it all in one video. Alright guys, well until next time, this is me, Screezilla, calling it a night. Bye bye.